This last step of practice that we're going to work on is watercolor background techniques. Now you don't necessarily have to use one of these techniques in your final project in the background, but these are just to give you some different directions, different styles, and ways that you can complete your project. You should have something in your background so it's not just the white of your paper, but depending on how large your objects are, how many objects you're painting into your composition, will definitely depend on how detailed or extravagant you get with your background. So it could definitely just be a light wash of color, but consider trying these out and thinking about if any of these would work well for your specific final project. So the first square here is a color gradient vignette. A vignette is basically just where you have the corners or the outside of your project darker and then it fades into a lighter color. And then a color gradient is where you're using multiple colors. So I'm gonna do a color gradient with greens. So I'm gonna use dark green and light green. So I'm gonna start with the darker color on the outside and making sure that I'm using plenty of water so that it's not drying. I'm adding a little bit around the corners here. And I'm gonna add just a little bit more water. It might even be a good idea to start with water underneath to help that not dry as quickly. So I'm gonna just add a little bit of water on the outside, grab a little bit of that green, and add it into the corners. Now, if you want it to be darker, you can always go back over it with another layer as you're working. But right now I'm just trying to build my layers, work quickly so that I can fade this dark green into the light green. So next I'm grabbing that light green color and just trying to really mix it and blend it well with that dark green. And then the vignette, like I said, you want to fade it. So I'm fading it just into the white background, which basically would be where your main composition or object on your final project would be. So this kind of puts a spotlight on it and helps to draw focus and attention in towards your focal point. Now, since this paper is just printer paper, just like the last couple practice, it does look kind of splotchy. But if this was done on watercolor paper, you would really see a nice effect with this blending out. So I'm gonna go back into the corners, make that a little bit darker, and just keep blending it into my light green. You could also try to bring some texture into it. So think about how you want your final project to look, whether you want some lines like this on top of the light green, or if you want it to be completely smooth and blended out. But that's the first square. The second one is a light wash and line design. So I'm gonna start with just a really light wash of color in the background. I'm gonna use a yellow here. And then the line design could be done with anything that you would like to use. So that could be done with pencil, colored pencil, charcoal, something that you can add a little design into your background, just to give it some texture and some detail and interest. This technique would work really well for those of you who maybe don't have a lot of detail in your foreground and have just a really simple object. This is a way to really liven up your composition and bring a lot more into it. So I'm just gonna use a thin Sharpie here. Definitely let this dry first before you start working, but just to give you an idea of what to look for, think about if you've done Zentangle designs, think back to Zentangles and how to incorporate that sort of design into these, or you could just do some simple lines. So I'm just gonna do some lines in the background here, so like this, and then I'm gonna change up the direction, and then just continue kind of rotating these lines going in different directions. So this is a line design. You could even think about drawing something out. So maybe drawing some flowers, or thinking about what your focal point or objects are that you're actually drawing into your composition and how you could maybe incorporate those in a creative way. But lines, like I said, are just a way to bring a little bit of detail, texture into that background, especially if you have a very simplified focal point. So fill in at least a border around the outside. You could even draw just a quick circle to represent where your main object or focal point in the composition is, and then just add your line design going around the outside. All right, moving on to the third design. This is a radial drip painting. So this flower is meant to represent where your focal point is in the composition. The nice thing about this technique is that it leaves your focal point completely blank, and you're just adding the drip and the design around the outside. So to get started with this, I'm gonna start with some water and add that water kind of in the area where I want my color to go. And then I'm gonna grab some colors. I'm gonna use some blue, and holding my paper vertically, I'm bringing my blue paint right on top of where I added that water. So that water is gonna give us a little bit more of that drip effect. And then I'm gonna specifically choose areas to add more water to where I want the drips to go. So I can kind of space those out a little bit, just adding a little bit more water, kind of making a path for the drips. So I'm gonna drip those all the way down and then stop and rotate as I'm working. So now I'm gonna rotate this way and have my drips radiate out from the center, coming down on the bottom here as well. So same thing, I'm making sure I'm using a good amount of water, grabbing my blue, or you could even change to a different color at this point, adding a line of it across, and then just adding the lines of where I want those drips to come down. Then just kind of tapping it, letting it drip, and rotating again. So I'm going all the way around the outside. I'm gonna add water going around the outside here. Add my blue paint, and choose where I want that water to drip. So just making a few different placements here, adding more water into it, and then tapping it, letting it do its thing and drip. And then one more direction here I'm gonna add. So I'm gonna take my water and then add my blue and create the path for that water to go. All right, so now I have the drip kind of radiating around the outside. One thing you'll notice with this technique is the background still is obviously white because the drip doesn't fill the entire background. So if you're doing this for your final project, definitely think about that. I would consider doing a light wash of maybe a really light color first. So maybe a light purple would have worked well with this darker blue. And then even trying to pull or add a little bit of blue before that paint drips out around the outside here, just to fill in that white space around the focal point, could be a good idea. So always think about the full composition, but this does add an interesting effect, a nice technique. I would even consider going over it with maybe another color. So I can take purple, bring that along the bottom, and maybe make this purple color drip down in areas where the blue didn't. Or even right on top of the blue to mix with it. So that could add just another extra layer into this technique. This last background technique is tinfoil or mixed media. So this is kind of a collage style, but experiment and do your own thing with this, but use something other than watercolor paint for this specific technique. You could maybe start out by coloring with a colored pencil in the background, or crayons or pastels. So be creative, try something different, or tinfoil just to throw out an interesting kind of texture that works well with watercolor. So maybe considering ripping up or collaging some tissue paper pieces into the background, or even adding little highlights of tissue paper. So maybe you could combine effects where you're doing the drip painting and then adding some tinfoil into different areas on top of that effect. So keep thinking about how you can be creative, how can you come up with a unique idea for your background that's really gonna tie things together and make it something different from what anyone else is doing. So again, here's an idea for collaging tinfoil into the background. Maybe incorporate some magazine pages, some newspaper that's ripped up. Obviously glue this down, but just to kind of show you an idea. You don't have to fill the middle of this square, but if it's easier, go ahead and fill the whole thing. This is where you would be going around your focal point in the composition. maybe consider even bringing in something else too. So maybe on top of the tissue or on top of the tin foil, I'm adding some lines with Sharpie or doing some sort of design on top. So be creative and come up with something unique for this last square.